All right. Hitting record and squadcast. Welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show, everybody. Ow! I think I pulled something again. Oh, yeah, baby. Welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. My name is Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for a bunch of companies, and I also run Podcast Engineering School. And every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. I have a background in audio engineering in the music business from years ago. And anyway, what we talk about here on this show is really how to produce professional quality audio for podcasts. And it really helps a lot of people, because most people who get into podcasting, they don't really know how to, record and process audio correctly. And there's problems, and there's like a million problems, right, Jason? Like, you don't know how many problems there are until you try to do it. Yeah, exactly. So I'm happy to be here. I'll introduce Jason for real in a couple seconds. Of course, Barry is here with me, and I got to turn up Barry's level a little bit. Sometimes Barry's mic, I don't know how it gets inched down, but it does. What's up, Barry?
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's your response to what's up?
No way. You crazy?
That's your response to me asking you if that's your response to what's... Anyway, all right, so Jason Sheesley's here. He's the owner of Abridged Audio. He does podcast editing, and he has a podcast gear guide on his website as well. So we'll link to that in the show notes. And he also has Alphatone audio. He makes custom audio cables for musicians. So that's pretty cool. So Jason, welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show.
Thanks, man. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Happy you're here. Glad we're connected. And so we'll go ahead and do the speed round first, of course. By the way, do you host your own show at all?
I do not host my own show.
Okay. So, because normally with the speed round, what I do is ask people like, okay, when you're getting ready to record an episode of your show, tell me the setup and your mic and where the signal flows and all that. But anyway, so why don't you just tell me what equipment you do have locally, just to go over that.
Yeah, I am just rocking what I think is one of the most underappreciated, underrated mics of all time, Shure SM58, straight into my RME Babyface Pro on high quality K&M mic stand. You got to get the German stuff, man.
Oh, wait, what K&M?
Yeah, K&M. They make the best stuff for mic support and all that.
Really? I have to check that out. And now, is that a boom arm, or is that like just a stand that's standing on the desk?
I've got a stand on the desk, but I have there's a material, it's called sorbethane, which is basically, they used to make shoe liners with it. Basically all it is like a rubbery material, and it absorbs shock. And so I put sorbethane feet on the bottom of the mic stand so you don't get any vibration or anything like that.
I need to know what that is and how to spell that. So because I have some clients who, they'll just do a little bit of typing when they're recording an episode.
Yeah.
Or even just scrolling, like hitting the up and down arrow, and it's like you hear little thuds, and it's, you can get
this stuff. It's magic. You can get it in lots of different form factors. Is like you can get in spheres or pads, whatever. You can get them on Amazon. But it's also great in a studio. Like if you have bad isolation between like your speakers, like if you just have them sitting on like wood or like a shelf or something like that, you get some sorbethane feet underneath your speakers.
Yeah,
it decouples them like you wouldn't believe.
Oh, that's cool. All right, so we're gonna go through your equipment. Especially, I want to talk a little bit, definitely about the SM58 and Babyface Pro. And what kind of computer are you using? A Mac?
MacBook Pro.
MacBook Pro, and then,
which is brand new. I got one of the, because last week my old one, my last MacBook Pro was like 5 years or something, 5 years old, and my hinges, like my lid was starting to not close all the way. So I heard, you can like adjust the hinges or something like that, or reduce some tension. So I'm not scared about opening them up. So I took the back off, and my battery was swollen up like a balloon. Oh. And I just thought, this thing could literally explode or catch on fire in any minute. So I kind of had to make like an emergency purchase. So I went out and I got like one of the 2019s, like literally a week ago. I just got everything installed on it like a couple days ago. So, but it's working so far.
Oh, good. Yeah. And it's, MacBook Pros are obviously very good. And, but wait, you got a 2019, so that means you can't plug anything into it, right? It has no ports.
Man, like, well, you got to go over to OWC or like MacSales.com, and you get the Thunderbolt 3 hub, which is like not cheap, but that's one of the reasons I was holding off, because I wasn't ready to make the Thunderbolt 3 jump and like basically the USB-C port connector jump. But just like push came to shove and I had to do it. So last week was an expensive week, but I got everything hooked up and it's amazing and it's great and it's good to go. So
cool. And what was the software again you're recording into?
Wavelab Elements. Well, it's by Steinberg, which, Steinberg, of course, they're probably most famously known for Cubase, like their big DAW, but they do a few other products as well. And Wavelab has just been one of those 2-track editors that's been around like forever. And it just works. It's just, I don't use it every day, but it's just like super stable. It works really well. If you want to get into like some detail editing, it actually has like a spectrograph view in it and that kind of stuff. It's just got some really cool features on there. You can pick it up. Like, it's not that like the Elements is, I don't know, it's like $100 or something like that. But I just liked it better than like anything else that was on the Mac side.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I love those little 2-track editors. That's how I like to do my detailed editing. And when I was looking for one, I found Twisted Wave, which I like a lot. The only thing bad with Twisted Wave is that you can't adjust the playback speed, which at times, you want to speed something up so you can get through things quicker. But anyway, I didn't ever try Wavelab. I might have to look at that. Can you adjust the playback speed in Wavelab?
I've never tried.
Okay. So we'll look that up later, or I'll look that up later. Yeah. And then, so for your clients, I still think we're sort of in the speed round. I'm just trying to make a list of everything you're doing and using. So for your clients, obviously they send you audio, and then which DAW are you using? A DAW to produce client episodes?
Yeah, Pro Tools.
Pro Tools, okay. And so you work in Pro Tools, and then you do your detailed editing in Wavelab Elements.
Yeah, actually, I don't really need Wavelab so much for the podcast episodes. Like, I'm just using that just to do like local recording but every once in a while it's nice, because every once in a while, let's just say if I make a small mistake when I bounce, and maybe like I just like didn't set my range right, and I have like for whatever reason, like I bounced my episode and it's like 2 hours long. I thought, what happened? Just because I made the bad selection in Pro Tools or something, then I'll just open up in Wavelab and just trim the end of it real quick or something like that, rather than re-importing into Pro Tools and cutting it off and bouncing and all that kind of stuff. So I can just do like a really quick kind of edit or something like that. Also, I've had every once in a while, if I have to do any kind of like mono to stereo conversion type stuff, I'll do those in Wavelab. Like if someone sends me like, oh, here's a stereo file, but it's just like in the left channel, then usually I'll just kind of just double it up or something like that. Even though I can just use like one half of the channel in Pro Tools, just in case, then I don't have to think about it. So it's literally just like copy, paste, save, and then it's there.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. Okay, so you're also an audio engineer, right?
I am.
You graduated from Full Sail. Wait, what year did you graduate?
Ooh, many moons ago. That was probably about 1999.
Oh, 99.
2000. Yeah, about 99, something like that.
That's not that long ago. I mean, I have a friend, Michael Helms, who has the Location Sound podcast. I think he graduated from Full Sail in like 90, around 90, 91, something like that.
Yeah.
And him and I met in 92 or 93 in New York City. Maybe he graduated in 92. I don't know. But anyway, so, okay. And then you did live sound for many years. What kind of live sound did you do?
Well, right out of high school, I kind of like, I went into the military, but I went into as a musician. So, and
wait, hold on. You went into the military as a musician?
Yeah, absolutely. They have all of the armed forces. They actually have military band programs. And I think at the time usually about 40 people. And at the time in the Army, I think there were like 40 or 50 different bands, something like that. And, usually like the primary mission is just for like troop morale and that kind of stuff. But so you have a lot of things like you'll play like change of command ceremonies and stuff like that. But it's also, you'll go out and you'll play like high schools for recruiting purposes, or you'll play like, they'll have the jazz group go out to like general's cocktail hour or something like that. So you would end up doing, like no joke, any would probably do like 300 gigs a year. They're busy all the time. And a lot of times you would have to have a PA for that. So that's really where, and I'd always been like technically oriented. And I just really love doing the sound stuff. So, but they just kind of basically get whoever they can, whoever knows how to run it to do it. And I just like jumped on it right away. And that's kind of really where I got the foundations for like, all my, foundational knowledge in audio engineering.
Right. And then it was after that you went to Full Sail?
Yes.
Okay. That's cool. And by the way, 300 gigs a year, that's like Metallica level busy. Like that's, you know what I mean? That's a lot, dude.
Yeah, because it's like, you'd be in like every unit, it was like 40 people, they'd break it up in like 6 or 7 different bands. Like you'd have the concert band and you have the stage band and the jazz band and the Dixieland band and the brass quintet band and the rock band and like all this kind of stuff. And if you end up in like 3 or 4, like you could be doing like, 10 gigs a week, just you. Right. So, and it's just like, okay, here's my AM gig and here's my PM gig and I got to run sound tomorrow for this one and I got a rehearsal for, it's just like you just go nonstop.
Did they have metal at all?
The rock band played Metallica from time to time.
Oh, okay. All right.
Enter Sandman was in our set list.
Okay. Oh, all right. Yeah, that makes sense. No Death or Sepultura though.
Well, you are, representing, something a little bit bigger than yourself. So you kind of have some limits, but we would, we get a little crazy from time to time on stage. It just depends on what the gig was. There's a time and place for everything. And we, historically, we'd always try to push the envelope as much as we could.
Nice. That's great. That sounds like fun. I never knew that the armed forces have bands, but it makes sense. It's like you need some music and entertainment, and it's like do it in house. Like then you can control it and all that. Yeah. All right. Then you worked professionally on Music Row in Nashville. So
I did. What'd
you do there, brother?
Well, it was as much as I liked live sound and music and all that. It's like I saw all that. I really like doing live sound because there's that adrenaline that's associated with it. Like it's live and it's real and like anything could happen. And you have to be, when something goes, you have to troubleshoot really quickly. And it's just a very dynamic environment. I really like that. But a lot of times too, it's always kind of a compromise. Like I can't get my speakers where I want them, or I can't do this, or the room sounds bad, or I just don't have enough SPL to fill this hall or something like that. Mm-hmm. And what I really wanted is a desire to like really take it to the next level and really start putting finishing details and stuff. And I thought, well, I have to get into the studio to do this. So basically when I went to Full Sail, I just wanted to really dive deep, figure out how do you make a record? Like, how does it really work in the studio? Like, how does it work on tape machines and inline consoles and just the flows of the session and all that? So when I decided, when I graduated, like I just wanted to go all out. So it's basically for me, it's like New York, LA, Nashville. That's it. Like there's no fourth choice, London, I guess, but I wasn't ready to hop the pond for that. So it's just like, I'm going to graduate and I'm going to move to Nashville and I'm just going to get a job in a studio and that's it. And I'm just going to grind it until, kind of fake it till you make it. And that's exactly what I did.
Okay. So you started in the studio as an intern or an assistant engineer, something like that?
Yeah, you start off as an intern.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I did that in New York as well, didn't it? I don't know. Did you appreciate that whole process? Because I did. Oh my.
I mean, some parts are better than others, right? But this is still a part where, you say an intern, that means you're spending a lot of time doing nothing. You're spending a lot of time wrapping mic cables. You're spending a lot of time going to get food and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, but taking out garbage, very long. Vacuuming.
Yeah, like all that stuff, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
But the thing is, a lot of the interns, they also were like still in school. They were going to day jobs or stuff like that. So they were kind of around. It was more just like a part-time thing. Like maybe they just needed the credits or something like that. Whereas me, I had saved up like a ton of money, when I was in the service and all that. So when I got out, it's just like I didn't have to have a job. So it's not like I was on a schedule. I was at the studio every day. Like I was at the studio like 60 to 80 hours a week. Just whenever anybody needed anything, I was the guy. So it was a huge advantage for me. So then basically when one of the house engineers is just like, hey, I got to do a huge full band setup tomorrow. I want you to help me. Cool. That's where you start to get hands-on. That's where you start to learn mic placement. That's where you start to learn signal flow. That's where you start to learn just how to get a session up and running. And just all the million things that you have to do, even just like the mic stands and the lights and the carpets and the light stands and making sure you're ready for the musicians and labeling the console and calibrating the tape machine and just doing all this stuff. So it didn't actually take me too long before I was just really kind of in it and doing stuff.
Cool. So then, and what studio, did you work in one studio or multiple?
I worked at a studio called Soundstage, which is still there. Oh. And the thing about Soundstage, it was so awesome, and it's the one I wanted to go to. And for a reason, is that it wasn't just the studio. The people that owned the studio, they actually had 5 or 6 different businesses. So of course they had the studio, which was a 3-room studio. But upstairs they had a separate business which did mastering. They had a separate business which literally just did tape duplication.
Right.
They had a cartage company. They had a gear rental company, and then they had another company which was called Interface, which basically that was their custom cable and studio installation. So in a one time or another, I actually ended up working in all of them. So basically, it's just like we've got a random box of like 14 ADAT tapes that are unlabeled in a box, and we need to transfer this stuff over digitally to Dash, and there's no time code or anything like that. Or it was dropped out. It's like we need someone to like figure all this stuff out, line everything up, jam sync some time code, and bounce the stuff over. I'm like, I'll do it.
Right.
And you just sit down, you figure out, and you do it. So just like the amount of like skills that I learned there was just like unreal. So it's basically like you throw me into a room with like, 10 different tape formats, and I was totally comfortable. And I could get everything set up and synced up and rolling. So and that's where, and even just like hanging out with the cartage guys, it's like, hey, can you help me make a run over to so-and-so other studio? Because I got to set up this player and I'm late. Sure, jump in a truck, go over, set up. But then you meet guys at other studios, and then you start to make some connections and that kind of stuff. So just the sheer amount of work there was to do there was just incredible. And I learned, it was just a massive experience, like very quickly.
Cool. Well, we're going to get into all the podcasting stuff in a second, but why did you leave that studio?
A burnout. Basically.
Okay.
I got to a point after interning about 6 months where we opened up a 4th room, and which I did all the wiring on and installed it. And we basically finished the construction like an hour before the first session happened. And at that time, I'd been around long enough, and the owner was just like, hey, why don't you go do that session? Like, why don't you? So basically, like, you're an assistant engineer, like right now. Right. And I was like, okay. And basically it's like that was, and it turned out that was my room, but that room ended up being booked like 30 days a month. And I was the only guy that did it. So I basically averaged, and I kept track of my hours when I worked there. I averaged like 74 hours a week for like 3 straight years. Wow. And I think I took like 1 week off a year. And at the end of it, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like it was just like super overwhelmed, and all the time, like literally making like poverty level wage. Yeah. So, which I could sustain it because, cost of living in Nashville is not that much. But at the end of the day, I just thought this is kind of, you hear the thing about the studio system where you work your way up. But the thing is the studios, they just don't, it's kind of towards the end of it, and we're just not paying you a whole lot. And I just really wasn't prepared to be a freelance engineer at that point. So I kind of bowed out and did some other stuff for a while.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very, very similar to my experience as well. Just worked so much over a 3-4 year period that you just have to, you can't do it anymore.
Well, and the thing is too, like if you watch even just like super accomplished engineers that come in, they've been doing this like 15, 20 years, it never changes. Like they also are just working crazy amounts. It's the constant hustle, trying to, always trying to find their next gig, all that kind of stuff, trying to keep their families together. Like, man, I have crazy breakup stories, man, about, guys that came in the studio. It's just like, I'm like, hey man, what's up? He's like, my wife left me today. I was like, wow, dude, I don't know what to say. He's like, well, I can't do anything about that now. Let's get the session started. I was like,
jeez.
Dude, exactly. I'm not kidding. And for the record, that did happen not once, but twice. Oh. And one of them literally like Grammy Award winning kind of engineer. It's like, which is, he's kind of as successful as you'd want to be. Right. And he's still like, he can't hold it together. And I just thought, do I want to do like in 10 years? Do I want to be like having like an ulcer and a heart attack? I was like, I don't know. I got to rethink this.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. And so that's why my goal, I'm sure yours was too, was to become an engineer like that, like a mix engineer who's mixing, hit records all the time. And, in a way, I mean, I wish I achieved that, but I just didn't for a bunch of reasons. But at the same time, like, maybe it's a good thing that I didn't achieve that.
But it's interesting, too. I mean, I think there's, in a way, it's like, it sounds like we both did it, and we both kind of succeeded temporarily. But it's one thing, it's hard to know what you really want to do until you get into it. Right. And in a lot of ways, like, I still learned, like, so much. And it was such an... And for a long time, like every morning when I got up, I couldn't wait to get to the studio. And I just loved it. I had such magical moments, those musicians down there are just ridiculous. Yeah. Man. And it's just like, even, I've got my own like celebrity stories and just like, I worked in Nashville at the absolute height when country music was super popular. But there's so much other stuff that's going on, and just like the amount of just the caliber of the people that you would work with, it's just unreal. And it's just like, still, if I had to do it all over again, I probably would. I don't think I'd trade that experience for anything.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you there too. Me too. Wow. So cool. So you have that background. And then, so what year did you start to get into podcasts production?
Just a few years ago, because when I got out of the studio, I actually got into IT for a while, just because I wanted to do something very different. And I actually did that for quite many years. And I was always still doing audio on the side. Like I would just find little local artists that I liked, and I would just produce them, or just like go out and do some recording, or just find various gigs. So I never kind of completely stepped away from audio, but it was never a focus. I was just doing it because I loved it. Right. But then a few years ago, I left IT, and it was a situation where it's just like my company and I, after like many, many years, we finally just kind of got tired of each other, and I stepped away. And I was with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my fiance, and she had a similar thing where she had a long-term career, and we had both kind of just like, gotten tired of it at the same time. And she was just like, I'm never going back to work for anyone else again. I'm just going to do my own thing. So we kind of basically made a decision. It's just like, well, we should do this together. So we basically just like slashed expenses, moved in together, and it's just like, okay, let's hustle. Let's start doing this. And that's when I started Alphatone Audio, because of all the experience I had from the studio, just doing the cables. I could get it up and running pretty quickly. And then about a year and a half later, I thought, well, I just wanted to mix it up a little bit. So I thought I kind of missed just working with, I was still doing audio from a cable perspective, but I wasn't really working with audio, and I kind of missed it. So I just started looking around for stuff. It's like, well, what could I do? I didn't really want to get back into music production again, and the podcast thing came up, and I thought, well, this is just really interesting. It says this is a good opportunity to do something a little different. That maybe sounds simple, but maybe I can just really kind of dig down deep into it and just learn some new skills and try something different.
Cool. All right, so that brings us up to current day, and you're using an SM58, which of course is the Shure microphone, the infamous, well, it's not infamous, famous Shure microphone.
It's both.
Yeah. Wait, what'd you say?
It's both.
Oh yeah. Well, that's true. I guess. Yeah, I guess you can go with both. All right, but let's talk about the Babyface Pro. So I was the Babyface Pro is an expensive audio interface.
Yes.
But it's very high quality, and a lot of people love it, and you are just like a huge fanboy of it, right?
I don't use the word fanboy lightly, but I'm an RME fanboy. Okay. The one I used before this is I used to have, back in the Firewire days, I had their Fireface 400. And I used it, I don't know, like 10 years or something. Like it just lasted forever. And the thing about it, had the interface 10 years, you could still get drivers for it, and they would still update the drivers. And the thing about RME is of course, yes, they're very solidly built. Like they're all metal. It's like you could drop them and they still work and all that. They sound very good. And it's particularly very neutral. Like there's kind of no flavor to them or anything like that. Their voice has been very neutral. But what they're really legendary for, I think, is their driver support. And it does not crash. It just doesn't crash ever. No matter where your latency settings are, you want to you don't want to reboot your computer for a month, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's just like they're so stable. And I just remember I never had problems with it. And so when I finally had to just, when I was kind of moving on past Firewire and all that, and I just had to get a new one, I thought, I was looking around, I thought, well, man, like there's like the Focusrite stuff looks okay. And like all of a sudden UA is making great stuff. And even like some of the Motu cards and stuff like that look really good. But at the end of the day, I just thought, man, I'm just going to stick with RME. Just because it's always been bulletproof. And sure enough, this one has been no different. From the minute I plugged it in, it's been running rock solid.
And so let's go over like the amount of inputs and stuff. But I have to mention that I was working with the folks from RME about a year and a half ago to do some webinar training for the Babyface Pro. And they were offering a bundle for podcasters, which was great. But the Babyface Pro, what's the price point on that? It's like $800 or $900, isn't it?
It's like 900, and they just updated it because they had the Babyface and they came with the Babyface Pro, and now they had the Babyface Pro FS. And I think they basically just kind of updated some. It's the same thing basically, but I think they just kind of upgraded the internals a little bit. Like I think maybe they improved their steady clock, word clocking in there or something like that. And I think that's about 1100.
Okay.
Which I mean, for basically a 2 in, 2 out, it's not, or like a 4 in, two out. I mean, they have the optical on it, but I can't see, at least for podcasting, I can't see someone else going out and buying like an 8-channel ADDA and hooking it up through optical. I mean, maybe they would, but if they're going to do that, I'm like, well, just go get a big Scarlett.
Right. Yeah, there's 2 XLR inputs on the Babyface Pro.
2 XLR inputs and 2 XLR outputs.
Right.
And there are 2 additional 1/4-inch inputs on the side. So if you just had like, something else that you wanted to run in there, you could.
Oh, right. Okay. Like my iPad to play
forget it.
Barry clips.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. One thing about the Babyface Pro that I liked is the mic pre's and the converters, because I actually tested it against my Mix Pre 6 from Sound Devices.
Nice.
And very similar. It was so similar that, well, here's the thing. It wasn't like a 100% scientific test. It was just me, but I did a real test though. I mean, I used the same mic, I really tried to get it as close as possible and then listen to what was recorded. And in my, maybe 85% scientific test, very close and very good. And when you said it sounds neutral, I just want to remind everyone that neutral isn't bad. Like neutral is actually really good, especially when it's like really pristine mic pre's and the the A to D conversion, right? Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And it because it's interesting because it's like even when you get into like really high end, like stupid high end stuff, like let's talk like Apogee. It's like I don't, it's just like, oh man, like let's go get an 8-channel symphony. Okay, that's 4,000, right? But I don't know anybody that thinks Apogee is neutral. Apogee has a tone. Or go out and get some Burl stuff. Go buy a Burl mothership or something like that, where you just literally spending $6,000-$8,000 on a configuration. Nobody thinks Burl stuff is neutral. So, I mean, when you talk about coloration and stuff, it doesn't always scale up like, oh, well, the more I pay, the less color it gets. I mean, certain brands are just like, well, this is kind of like our sound and this is how we do it. But the RME guys, they've always been on the subject. It's just like, just very clinical. Like what you put in is what it sounds out. We don't put any sound in it. We don't do anything like that. So, And it's not that I drastically need that amount of clarity in my sound or anything like that, but it's just nice to know that, well, it's, what I put into it is what I'm going to get out of it.
Yeah, and then if you want to add color, you can add color afterwards
with a plugin or something like that,
and then you can
any number
dial in the color that you want precisely. Yeah,
exactly.
So
there's 2 other nice things about the Babyface 2 that I don't think most people talk about. One is the headphone outputs on them. There's actually 2 outputs. There's the 1/8 inch and the 1/4 inch, but they actually run at different impedances. So you could actually take your headphones and plug, because if you plug your headphones into one output and the other one, they sound different. So you can actually match the impedance of your headphones to the proper headphone output on there.
Oh, that is cool too, yeah.
Which is cool. So it's not just like, oh, they're 2 outputs, but the same thing. It's like, no, they actually have different impedances on them. And the other thing is, in the RME control software, they actually have like a little section in there, which is basically like a control room setup. And then, the Babyface has like 4 buttons on it. They're all programmable. So whenever if I'm in RX, I'm doing something really detailed, I want to put my headphones on, with one button, I can kill the mains and resend the signal over to my headphones. And then the volume control, then I'm controlling the volume of the headphones. And then as soon as I'm done with the headphones, I put them down. I hit one button and headphones mute and it goes back to my studio monitors, which it just saves you time. It's just super quick and it just works well.
That's cool. So before we move on, like you mentioned Apogee, and I've never used an Apogee interface. But back in the studio days, we used to rent those little Apogee converters because some engineers, like obviously when you mix down a song, back when I was in the studios, you would mix it down to 1/2-inch tape, but you would also, in parallel, mix it to a DAT player. But they would put these Apogee converters before the DAT player to get the best conversion and stuff. And the Apogee converters were really good for that. Everyone loved them for that. But when you say that these Apogee interfaces color the sound, like, are you aware of how it colors the sound? Like, how does it color it?
Most people, I haven't used one myself, so I can't say from firsthand experience, but most people tend to think that all Apogee products, they always sweeten the high end a little bit. Okay. And again, this is like very, very subtle stuff. And I'm not even saying it's like better or it's worse, but most people say, well, like the high end on the Apogee stuff, it's just a little bit sweeter. It's just a little bit softer. So which some people like, but then some people just like, oh, well, it lacks clarity. It just depends on your perspective.
Right. So that's interesting. If it sounds sweeter and like smoother, then some people say it's with that sound, they think it's lacking clarity. Just maybe not enough bite or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
Well, and also it depends stylistically, like what kind of music you're listening to. If it's just like, some people that like put this. I don't know a lot of rock guys that like the Apogees. You know what I mean? It's just because they want that sizzle on the cymbal and stuff like that. And again, all this stuff, it's not even so much like a frequency response thing. It's really just like, how stuff is aligned, and there's just so much into this kind of stuff. It's just very, very subtle.
Right. Yeah. Same thing. Like similar thing happens with SSL consoles versus Neve consoles, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like
for sure.
The little differences, and usually rock and metal prefer like an SSL to make it more mid-rangey and more forward, or I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on, you get those like, SSL, like E, the channel strips, like from the E series or something like that. Like those things have a sound. Because I don't remember back in my studio I worked at, we had a 56 input. It was an SSL 4000, and it was 48 E modules, but then we had 8 G modules, which was the next step generation.
Right.
And even like same manufacturer, same frame size, same everything. It's like even those didn't sound the same. Like those were very different, and they were like quite a bit cleaner. But like, no, that E stuff, man, that is the sound of the 80s.
Right.
That's just all there is to it. Like you put stuff through that, it's just like, man, that's what the 80s sounded like.
Yep. Yeah, I worked on E's and G's. Yeah, I like the E's. I don't know why, but I just like the E's better. And the G consoles are good, but like something about the E series, it's like it's hard to explain what it is, but it's like a little more clear or crisp, or maybe even harshish. You could say.
Can be for sure.
Yeah. All right. So you got your MacBook Pro, and you got a Thunderbolt 3 hub. That's pretty cool. So I actually have never owned like a Thunderbolt 3 hub, but I might want to get one. You said they're expensive a little bit?
This one was $300.
Oh.
Just for the hub.
Wait. Okay. So a normal like USB hub is like, $15 at Best Buy. What's the difference there?
Well, I mean, a lot of it has to deal with the ports. Because again, like on the new MacBook Pros, it's just like there's nothing on it. Like there's 4 USB-Cs and that's it. So if you want to, take your SD card from your camera and put it in, like you can't do it. It's just like you want to plug in a Cat 5 cable, you can't do it. They have a headphone jack on there, but it's just like, oh, if I just want to plug in like a USB stick so I can walk files across the house or something like that, it's like you can't do it. So basically, it's just the number of ports on it is pretty high. And the other thing about it that's pretty nice is the power supply that comes with, at least the particular one that I have, it's a 180 watt power supply. And for reference, most of the MacBooks, they come with like, I believe it's like an 85 watt. So when they talk about, oh, well, Thunderbolt 3, it's just kind of like, plug and play. It really is, because I have like 6 things plugged into my hub, and I just run one cable from the MacBook Pro into the dock. And not only does that cable transfer all my data, like to external hard drives or whatever, but that also supplies the power. So it's a true solution where, even if you had a dock, it's like, well, I plug my data into the dock, but then I also have to power the laptop. This is literally a one cable solution where you plug one cable from the MacBook Pro into the dock, and that's it. And everything is just fine, and it just works.
Yeah. So that's so that hub you got is a high quality hub, and
Yeah, and everything that you plug in is getting ample power and all that kind of stuff. So, right. And I had one. This is not my first one. I had I had a Thunderbolt 2 hub when I had my last Mac, and I used it for like 5-6 years, and it's just nice to have all the inputs and outputs. Because then like a lot of times I work from home. Like I'm sure lots of podcast editors. A lot of times maybe I want to go out and just if I'm not editing, I want to take the laptop out in the back patio and just kind of hang out outside. It's just like, okay, I got to unplug like 15 things and drag it out there. But then now it's just like literally one cable, pop it out, and just go. So. Right.
Hey, I got a question for Barry, who's here with me. Barry, do you sometimes just unplug your computer, go out and sit on the back patio and edit podcasts?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's good.
He knows what's up.
He knows what's up. Barry, do you did you ever have a computer that required? And I swear to God, I don't know why, but I literally look to my right when I talk to Barry. I don't know if that. I don't know why I do that, because first of all, he's not here, and second of all, no one can see me. But Barry, remember when all the computers used to have all those like wires that it was so hard to unplug, right? What'd you think about that?
It's a mess.
It's a mess. All right. So let's talk. I want to ask you about your monitors, but because then we're going to get into FabFilter and isotope stuff, which
Yes.
I probably waited too long to get to that stuff because those things are very applicable to podcast production and also very good plugins and software. But let's talk about your monitors. You have near field monitors there?
Yeah. I have a pair of Mackie 626 Mark IIs that I've had for quite a long time that I really like. And it's basically just a two-way. It's like a 6-inch woofer and like the 1-inch tweeter. And, they like their power. Like they have the amplifiers in them and everything. So
Got it.
And that was one of the advantages of working in the studio is like, lots of times guys are bringing their monitors in. So I got to hear like a lot of different speakers. Right. And I kind of knew what I liked and what I didn't like. And I just remember at that particular time, a lot of the guys were bringing in those like Mackie 824s. And they're basically the more powerful ones are the 8-inch woofers. Mm. And I just kind of really liked them, even more than like, the Gentle X or the KRKs at the time or something like that. Mm. So I got a pair, I don't know, a long time ago, I paid... I don't know, it's like $900 for the pair, which is probably a lot for a podcaster, but they still sound great. So I'm still kind of using them. And for headphones, Sennheiser HD600s for detail work, which are amazing and I love.
Cool, HD600s. I'm taking notes here. All right, so let's get into the FabFilter and isotope stuff. So let's start with FabFilter because they're one of my favorite plugin companies. So what are you using from FabFilter and how do you like it?
I have everything they make.
Everything,
basically.
Nice.
So my standard on my templates, my Pro Tools templates, on all the tracks where I know I'm going to have a vocal, whether it's the host or the guest, I have 5 plugins. First one is Vocal Rider from Waves. Big surprise.
Right.
But after that, I do Q3, which is the EQ. I have DS, which is their de-esser, C2, which is just their standard compressor, and then I do their L2 limiter in that order.
Nice. Yeah.
And I don't always need the de-esser, so I'll just bypass it if I don't need it, but it's just always kind of there.
Okay, cool. This is awesome. So Vocal Rider, yes, we've talked about that a lot on this show, and it's really handy, especially for podcast production because people's microphone technique. Well, and of course, I'm mainly talking about the guests on shows, like they don't know anything. They weren't trained in anything. The mic technique is usually not good. And so the Vocal Rider really helps. Is that what you find as well?
Yeah. And I really kind of like it more for just usually like, someone tells a joke and everyone erupts into laughter and you just have those really big things. And, I kind of have like a 2-prong approach to that. Like a lot of times in Pro Tools, like if I see that section, it's just like, it's only a few seconds, but it's like 10 dB hotter than everything else. I will just usually just like grab clip gain real quick and drag that down. But it's nice to have Vocal Rider there as well, just to smooth things out. Mm. And I do say I only use Vocal Rider to turn down. I never have Vocal Rider turn up the signal.
Interesting, because so
I'm really using it to make my compressor not work as hard.
Makes sense. Yeah, I also do that, but I do put some upside on it too because and especially with people who they trail off their sentences really bad. Like they'll just talk and then they'll just trail off to nothing and like without adding some upside to the Vocal Rider, they just disappear and you can't even understand their last 3 words. So. I
would say, and I'll clarify one thing. That's the way I'm using it right now based on the shows that I'm editing right now. I have used it just full on before where just, I had another show where things would, they could be like quite light and humorous at one moment and it could be like very heavy and emotional the next. And, you can just literally see it in the waveforms, when they're kind of in a good mood and they're talking about stuff and everyone's just like speaking loudly. And then, stuff would just, like very personal or emotional and just, naturally your level kind of drops down a little bit. So it worked great on a show like that to really kind of even things out. Cause certainly even at its loudest, it's like, I'm not applying like a ton of compression. Right. So.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Then you got the Pro-Q3, which is the FabFilter plugin. Great EQ. I love it. So what do you do you use it just like a normal EQ, or do you use any of the fancy bells and whistles like dynamic EQ or?
Man, is there nothing Q3 doesn't do? Like it's just so. One of the very first things I do before I'm even in the DAW is I take that back. When I first import stuff into the DAW, like I've already run it through an RX process where I'm doing like a high pass, low pass filter kind of thing, but I run it very conservatively. So sometimes if I bring it in and I think, oh, well, I need a little bit less high end or I need a little bit less low end, I will throw on like a high pass, low pass filter for sure. I used to use it as a de-esser because it has a dynamic EQ on it. And if you have Q3, but you don't have a de-esser, learn how to use dynamic EQ and now you have a de-esser. I find regularly I will use a dynamic band, usually down around between 100 and 300 hertz, depending on where it is. And again, it kind of goes back to that mic technique. You know, if you get the proximity effect, like someone kind of leans in a little bit and all of a sudden it gets really kind of bassy and they back off, it gets a little thin. I find out if usually it's thin 90% of the time, and then there's only that 10% of the time where they kind of lean in and you get that extra low end. That's where I'm going to set up a dynamic band on the low end to just back it off a little bit at those times where they get close.
Got it.
Yeah. And just other stuff in there too, like the tilt function on it. You know, instead of just using a standard parametric or a shelving band, like the tilt, if you have something that's just kind of like a little flat sounding, it's just like, well, I need a little more high end and a little more low end to just bring up the tilt function, you know, set your EQ and just watch like your entire EQ curve like literally just rotate. It can be like just a really quick fix for, you know, a lot of just like kind of dull sounding tracks.
Yeah, I like that tilt thing. Yeah, because you could tilt it, like if you tilt it at 1K, you can boost all the high frequencies and simultaneously it brings down all the low frequencies.
Yes, and I will from time to time use the match EQ function on it. And it's very specific. And because all my hosts right now are great and they're giving me good quality audio on their side. The guests, you know, it's always a mixed bag what they're going to be doing. So if I find I have a massive tonal difference between my host and my guest, I will use the match EQ to try to get the guest to sound a little bit more like the host, just as like a quick fix, something like that. I mean, I can always dial it in, but sometimes I'll just kind of try to match it just to kind of put them on the same, you know, the same level. And it's also kind of helpful if you just have two people to just have like incredibly different sounding voices. It can be a little challenging to really make sure that they kind of sound like they're at the same level and they kind of have like the same loudness. So I think, you know, especially if one person has a very thick voice and one person has a very thin voice, I'll tend to use match EQ just so they kind of sound a little bit similar. And I think I want to say, I can't prove this, but I just want to say psychologically, it just kind of makes them have like it makes them sound like they kind of know each other a little bit. It makes them sound more familiar. And if they're talking about a subject, and like, I'm not doing any super like controversial, like head to head, you know, political shows or anything like that where there's a lot of adversarial, you know, commentary or anything like that. It's just like usually like the host, they like their guests and they're all kind of talking about a common subject in a certain way. And I just feel like if I can kind of make them sound the same way just a little bit, it's just kind of putting everything on the same page. It's just something that's a little bit less distracting when you're listening to it. So I will use Match EQ, and I don't always take 100% of it because sometimes it'll bring back like, oh, well, you need 17 dB of this. I'm like, I don't think so. You know, so I'm like, well, let me just cut that in half or something like that. But I find that like that can be like a good function as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good use of that match EQ. I like that. All right. Then you're using the FabFilter Pro-DS, which is a great de-esser. I also use that. And then you use the FabFilter Pro-C2, which is the compressor.
C2 compressor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Because here's the thing. Not recently, probably 4, 5, 6 months ago, I ended up buying all the other, I bought the rest of the FabFilter plugins that I didn't already own. And the C2 was one of them. And I've tried to use it many times, and it's definitely a very good compressor. Mm-hmm. However, it has different modes, like, you know, clean and punchy, and like you choose a mode, and then you kind of dial in the settings. And like, I don't know, that plugin hasn't completely clicked with me. So anyway, tell us how you feel about the Pro C2 and how you use it.
Well, I definitely use it on the clean mode.
Okay.
Although the other modes are super cool. Like they are very cool. But I definitely use it on clean. And I kind of always maintain a very close relationship between my compressor and my limiter. And one of the things I used to do is I would have shows that have anywhere from like 2 to 4 people on them. And inevitably what I would always do is I would just set up a bus in Pro Tools and all the vocals will go down. And I would have a limiter on that bus because I know I actually don't actually use a limiter on my master bus when I bounce because usually there's always some stuff like music or sound effects that I don't want processed anyway. Those go straight to the master bus. So it was only limiting the vocals. But what I recently started doing, just because I thought it was easier, is it's like, well, let me just get rid of the bus and I can have everyone have their own version of L2. And that way, if someone just kind of needs like to be a little bit louder, just needs a little bit more, I don't have to try to play this massive like gain staging circle where I go back. It's like, oh, we'll turn this person up, but then it's hitting a little too hard.
Right.
And then it's just like, well, I don't really need that much input for the second person because they're in a Skype call and they're already smashed. So I started doing it on every one. And then I thought, well, what's my attack time looking like between my compressor and my limiter? And I think what a lot of people do is they set their compressor however they do it. And they're looking at that limiter as like, well, I'm going to use this to catch like all my peaks or anything like that. And that's kind of like my last bastion to make sure that my dynamics are controlled. But I actually kind of started doing it the opposite because I find that L2 is so much more transparent than C2. And granted, C2 is still a pretty transparent compressor. It's not like you're using 4-button mode on an 1176 or anything like that. Okay, It's still pretty clean, but it can start to distort the signal a little bit if you hit it too hard. So I use C2 pretty lightly. I'm usually at like a 4-to-1 ratio or something like that. I may be taking 3 or 4 dB off the top, but I use the absolute fastest attack time possible. And I find that that's and I'll take the knee control and I'll set it kind of like halfway or maybe even like a little bit closer to like a full knee. And I find that's the kind of sound that I like out of C2. But then as a result, on the L2, on the limiter side, I'll actually use a much slower attack. But just kind of like crank that up a little bit more. So I'm finding I'm actually peeling a lot of my attack off with C2 and I'm using L2 for my overall dynamic control.
Oh, that is so interesting. Yeah. So this is like deep stuff, by the way. I know people are listening and they're like, wow, this is deep, man. Like this is hardcore audio engineering stuff here, which I love. I mean, obviously that's what you and I do. That's what we love, right?
Sure. Well, and the crazy thing about L2, it's just like, hey, I'm gonna have to try this L2. It's just like, oh, guess what? There's no threshold control in L2. So you don't actually bring your threshold down to meet your audio. You crank your audio up to the threshold, which permanently exists at 0 dBFS, and then you trim your output as a result. It's very different. And if you're not used to it, you'll sit there like, I don't understand. Like, why isn't it compressing? Like, why isn't it doing anything? It's just like, you may need to add like 25 dB of gain into the limiter to get it all the way up to the top and then trim it down so you can eventually hit your minus 16 or whatever you're mixing to. So it's very different. But I've got everything tuned in right now, and I'm just super happy with it. And you can hit L2 so hard. Like every once in a while look up and be like, oh, gee, I'm taking like 15 dB off. Like, do I need to be doing that? And then you kind of go back and maybe just drop your level a little bit or something like that. But it's just like, I didn't hear it. Like it still sounded pretty good. Like it's really transparent. You can really crush it. And then definitely you can crush L2 harder than you can C2. In my experience,
right? You
can.
Yeah, me too. I haven't used the L2 as much as you. I've used it a little bit, and I really love that. The L2 is a tremendous limiter. Okay, so we talked about the attack times, but so on the L2, which is again the FabFilter Pro-L2 limiter, what mode do you use on that? I'm assuming transparent because you use that word.
I use transparent. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it's like that's the thing with podcasting and like human voices and it's just people talking. It's like for music, you might want to use a different mode to get some color out of it. But for what we're doing for podcasting, you usually want just clean and clear and transparent, right?
Right.
So anyway.
There are 2 exceptions to that. That I will pull there's 2 other plugins I will pull out from time to time. And they're both from Steven Slate or Slate Digital. And man, he makes unbelievable stuff. but it's more colored than a box of crayons, man. Like, and it's like you try to dialogue on it. You run some vocals into like one of his compressors or something. As soon as you're taking like 3-4 off the top, man, it gets all squishy and it's just like, and it sounds awesome, but it's just like, this is not cool for my podcast. But he does 2 other plugins. One is called Revival, and it's really just like a high-end harmonic generator. So if you have something that's completely flat and dead and just super lacks clarity, and EQ is just making it sound harsh and like an ice pick in your ear, I'll throw a Revival on it because that's actually like a harmonic generator. And what it generates is actually pretty smooth. So I actually put like a little bit of sheen on top. So that's something where I'll deliberately color something. And the other one is if you have something that's already sounds like an ice pick and is super harsh and thin and metallic, and I just need to warm it up a little bit, I will put a tape emulator on it, just for like a little bit of tape saturation, just to smooth it off.
Right, to sort of de-harsh it. Just
a little bit, yeah.
So with the Revival, I'm very interested about this Revival plugin from Slate Digital that you're talking about, because you say it's a high-end harmonic generator, and so here's
it's literally one knob. It's one knob, and you just turn it up.
One knob. Wow. So okay, here's my question. If I record, let's take a real-world situation where I might want to use that. Let's say the guest is, you're calling a guest through Skype onto their phone. So it's phone call quality, which means there's nothing above probably 3 kilohertz, maybe.
Sure.
And so in that case, and it's so hard to produce audio like that, because to get clarity, you got to crank up like 2 or 3K, but you can only crank it up so much before it gets harsh, right?
Right.
But so would this Revival plugin, does it somehow create the harmonics above, like in the case I'm talking about, would it create harmonics above 3K and add them in?
That's the way I understand that it works. Okay. But cool. it does have its limits. Like it's definitely not like an instant fix. And I think you have to, if you really had something that was cut off that low, because I've had it on before. I've had like some really horrendous stuff, and I've really kind of cranked it up, and you get a little bit of result, but not as much as I would have hoped. So it's not like it's 100% of the time it's going to be working, but I have used it in the past. I mean, because you're going to hit a point where it's just like you're not going to get anything out of this. And especially with EQ, like if you don't have anything above 3K and you try to use EQ is just not going to work because there's nothing to boost or cut. There's literally nothing. Like EQ has to have something to grab onto. Whereas something like this, if it's going to generate some high end for you, but even then it still has to have at least, it's going to generate it off. I don't know how low the fundamental goes where it looks at, but you've got to give it a little something.
Right. Interesting.
And you can get it for free, because that actually is part of they do give you like 1 or 2 for free, and that's one of the free ones. So you could try it if you wanted.
Great. Now I got to go get another plugin and install a different installer, but I love it.
Don't forget your iLock.
Oh. Well, I tell you what, I still don't have a physical one. Luckily, do you need a physical iLock for Slate plugins? I
think so. I don't know if they do the cloud stuff yet or not.
Really? Okay.
I still have a physical one, so I haven't really looked.
Oh, okay. I think I'm hoping everyone's doing the cloud thing. I recently got Sonox makes a plugin called the Inflator.
Yes.
Anyway, and they said, oh no, and I literally bought it, and literally 3 minutes later, I'm like, I read that, oh, you need an iLock, you need a physical iLock, and I was like, God darn it. So anyway, they said, no, you don't. They said you don't need a physical iLock, you just need the cloud iLock. But then it said you need to have that cloud connection open all the time while you're using it. And I was like, that stinks. So now I got to launch iLock before I do anything on my computer with audio. But it turns out, no, you don't. I literally installed it. It had to register itself through the cloud iLock thing. But then I don't even open the iLock thing, and I can use the plugin. Maybe like after a certain amount of weeks or something, it'll be like, oh, it lost connection to the license. So then I open iLock, it reconnects, and then that's it. So I'm happy about that, because that can be a nightmare with.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we're getting to the end here. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about in your setup that you want to highlight?
Setup, I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I take that back. I just did one of the things I use on my master bus, which I really enjoy. And there's only, again, on my master bus, like I said, I actually don't use any audio processing on my main outputs. I only have 2 plugins there. One is the Waves WLM meter, and that's just for a LUFS number, which I think a lot of people use and works well for me. But there's another one I use from Waves, and it's basically their Duro meter. And this may just be me being old and sentimental or something like that. But what the Duro meter is, if you look at it, it just looks like a standard PPM or peak program meter. But what it does is it actually displays the peak and the RMS level at the same time. And I think the people from Duro say, well, it's not really RMS, it's our own proprietary math and it tells you like an average power and all that kind of stuff. And okay, that's fine. But it's basically an average level, whether it's truly RMS or not, I don't know.
Right.
But, and of course the display, it's super granular. So you get a light like every 2 dB from 0 all the way down to like 40 or something like that.
Oh.
And it's nice because when you're looking at the average level and the peak level at the same time, you're basically visually looking at the loudness before you bounce it. It looks like a butter bar or anything like that. So, and it's one of those things too, when I'm trying to match up like 2 people and really get them to kind of glue together, you can look and see, it's like, well, if you're not necessarily hearing all the transients in the voice, you can look and see, it's like, well, this person, their peaks, usually your peaks are going to be about, after compression, I don't know, 12, 15 dB above your RMS level, depending on how squished you like your audio. So if I notice I have a huge disparity between like one vocal and the other, then I can go back and I can apply like a little bit more compression or something like that. I just kind of like to get that visual feedback on the level, because most metering in DAWs just aren't very good and don't provide you don't really know how they work. Like maybe it's a peak, but you don't know the dwell time and you can't adjust it and all this stuff. So it's like, I want to know what my level is on everything. So I can literally put on everything and I can actually just get like a really good visual feedback of my peak and RMS levels.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I just, you gave me an idea, because a lot of times when I'm balancing 2 voices, I don't ever look at a meter. I just use my ears, but there are times, and usually that's fine. But there are times when like it's difficult because one person might be talking more at a more consistent volume. But the other person is, sometimes they get loud and then sometimes they get real soft. And it's like, just using your ear to balance those 2 voices can be difficult. So I never even thought to check a meter like that shows some type of RMS level, which I could just monitor. I could just look at the meter while one person's talking, then look while the other person's talking. And that might actually help me balance those voices that are sometimes hard for me to balance just by ear,
Well, the other fun thing about this too is load up every single plugin you have that actually has a meter on it and see if they all read the same on the same signal.
Right,
because I guarantee you, someone's out. There's going to be an outlier, and it's just like, well, wait a minute, why? Because a lot of times it's like I'll bounce something down, and it's like you open up an Isotope RX just to check, and it's just like, oh, my peak level here is different. And it's just like, well, why? It's like, oh, well, because they use a different, AES standard for whatever, It's just so it's just a little second opinion just to check, because I like to really be consistent episode to episode.
Yeah.
So, and that just helps. So, and it's like, I don't know, it's not crazy expensive. It's like $40 or something, but it's just a little peace of mind. I just like it.
Yeah.
And it's pretty.
That sounds great. So I think we'll wrap up in a second, but I think I would love for you to come back on the show sometime in the future, because we didn't even talk about Isotope RX.
Oh man, you can go deep in RX.
All right, maybe let's do that then. Maybe 6 months from now or something.
Absolutely.
I would love to invite you again, and then we can talk about that. So
and super deep, obscure Pro Tool shortcuts.
Oh. Yeah, that only you and Tom Kelly care about those things.
He knows a thing or two, that guy.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, Jason Sheesley, this has been great, man. Everyone, go to the show notes and go check out his site, Abridged Audio. And what's the URL, by the way?
It is abridgedaudio.com.
Okay, and you have a podcast gear guide, so everyone go check that out. And the other links will be there. And the one last thing before we go, Jason, as you know, we like to yell "sound great" at the very end of the episode.
Let's do it.
Are you prepared to get your lips right on that mic, like you're like you're James Hetfield singing lead vocal on stage?
My entire life has led up to this moment, Chris.
And scream, sound great. All right, I want everyone else in their car to also scream, sound great. Thanks for listening. Check out Podcast Engineering School. Thanks again to Jason Sheesley. Great job, brother. Thank you, man.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
All right, now we're all going to yell. Try to distort your voice. All right, go. Sound great!
Yes, it hurts me now that you don't talk to me.